Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1147 for February 1st, 2026. Coming up in a few minutes.
It's an interesting sort of juncture in our road. It wasn't what I had planned for 2026 for sure, but I'm really excited that we're at that point in time and, really grateful for the support that we got from Diageo and Distill Venture over, the better part of 10 years.
Starward Whisky founder David Vitale almost lost control of his Australian distillery last year, with Diageo pulling funding for its Distill Ventures incubator and a board of directors ready to sell. Vitale pulled together the funding to buy back his distillery outright. I'll talk with David Vitale later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. We'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Hey, it's Gabriel from Dewar's Whiskey. Here's a quick tip. Whenever you're pouring great whiskey, especially something like Dewar's 12-year, don't overthink it. All you need is a few glasses and a couple of people worth sharing it with. The rest takes care of itself. Back in a bit.
Let's get started with the news. Alcohol duty in the UK jumped today by almost 3.7%, pushing Great Britain's alcohol taxes to the highest in Europe. During her autumn budget address, Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves said the increase would be in line with inflation. The Wine and Spirits Trade Association estimates the tax hike will add 39 pence to the price of a bottle of Scotch whisky. The industry got a bit of good news on the trade front this week. China announced it will reduce its import tariff on Scotch whisky after talks with the British government. The tax will be cut in half from 10% to 5% starting this week and will be a permanent reduction. China is the 10th largest export market for Scotch whisky. Irish whiskey tariffs will also be cut in India as a result of the new European Union Indian Free Trade Agreement. Irish and other European whiskies will get the same deal the UK got last year, an immediate reduction from 150% tariff to 75%, with a gradual drop after that to 40%. Even with the 150% tariff, Irish whiskey sales in India surpassed 700,000 cases in 2024, a 57.5% increase over the previous year. Irish whiskey industry leaders see India as a way to diversify sales away from dependence on the U.S. market. Bowen Distillery founder Pat Cooney said the agreement gives the industry momentum at a time when it's badly needed, and it reinforces confidence in the long-term growth story for Irish whiskey beyond any single market. Also out of India, Rampur whiskey owner Radhiko Kaitan wants to expand into the Scotch whisky business. The company's board of directors has approved the creation of a Scotch whisky division that will start the search for a distillery to buy. The unit will also oversee Radhiko's sourcing of vatted malt whiskies for its various Indian blends. In Washington, the Treasury Department's Tax and Trade Bureau is on shutdown again. Funding ran out over the weekend after the Senate passed legislation that only funds the Department of Homeland Security for 2 more weeks. That must be approved by the House, which is expected to take a vote as early as Monday night. The shutdown affects liquor label approval applications, though the folks who collect excise taxes are still on the job without pay. The next court hearing in the Uncle Nearest receivership case is set for next Monday in Knoxville, Tennessee, and the receiver overseeing Uncle Nearest and the Nearest Green Distillery has not received any credible offers for the company. That's according to the Lexington Herald-Leader, which obtained a letter sent by receiver Philip Young Jr. last week to shareholders, updating them on the status of the receivership. Uncle Nearest founder Fawn Weaver and her husband Keith want the judge overseeing the case to end the receivership and return control of Uncle Nearest back to them. Young said he would not accept any offer without approval of the shareholders. David Vitale isn't the only distillery founder taking back control of the company this week. Cotswolds distillery founder Daniel Zohr is back in the CEO's chair after Jeremy Parsons resigned last year following 4 years on the job. Parsons had spent almost a decade with Berry Brothers and Rudd, which owns a minority stake in the Cotswolds distillery. And Whistle Pig Distillery has a new CEO. Charles Gibb and the Whistlepig Whiskey Board have agreed to part ways after just 7 months. Chief Financial Officer Alex Roberts has been named CEO, and 2 longtime members of the board will work alongside Roberts to ensure a smooth transition. Sotheby's set records last Saturday with its American Whiskey Collection auction, featuring 360 different lots from a single collector. The auction brought in more than $2.5 million, including a single bottle of Old Rip Van Winkle 20-year-old, bottled for Chicago's Sam's Liquors back in 1982, that set a new American record for whiskeys at $162,500. Sotheby's Director of Spirits Johnny Fowle was the auctioneer and called it a watershed moment for American whiskey.
I think it's one of those things that just comes around very rarely. It's a significant collection and the first of its kind, the first thing that's really jumped up in price compared to its predecessors. So the last time we had something like this, it was in 2020, the Thoroughbred collection, and this roughly tripled its value. So it was really a watershed moment for American whiskey.
How so? American whiskey has not always been thought of as collectible, has it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's one of those things that's all relative. American whiskey is definitely, it feels younger as a market compared to Scotch and Japanese. But it's been going on in the background for a long time, particularly behind closed doors on Facebook groups, trading between collectors. It's just the auction side of it that feels a bit newer. And, I think there's a long way still to go. The values are high compared to what they were a few years ago, but they're still low in the grand scheme of things. So I think there's room for this young market.
The auction more than doubled its pre-sale estimates, with all lots selling. Finally, Whiskey Magazine handed out its final regional round of Icons of Whiskey Award winners representing countries outside of Scotland, Ireland, and the U.S. Taiwan's Kavalan Distillery was named Distillery of the Year, while Copenhagen Distillery was named Craft Producer of the Year. The Hartcut was named Independent Bottler of the Year, and Graham McAloney of Canada's McAloney Brewers and Distillers was named Craft Distiller or Blender of the Year. We have a link to the complete list of regional winners in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. The regional winners will go up against each other for Global Icons of Whiskey honors to be announced next month on the eve of Whiskey Live London. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. Let's check the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. The Scotch Malt Whisky Society's U.S. chapter has Burns Nights tastings this week, starting Tuesday night at Jack Rose in Washington, D.C., and continuing each night in Fort Worth, Texas, Denver, and Los Angeles, with tastings in Portland, Oregon on the 8th and Seattle on the 9th. The Aberdeen Whiskey Shop in Aberdeen, Scotland has a Berry Brothers and Rudd whiskey tasting coming up on Friday night. Great Jones Distilling in New York City has an evening of magic and craft cocktails on the 13th. The Kentucky Bourbon Country Auction and Celebration is the 13th through the 15th in Louisville, and the Whiskey Exchange's annual Welcome to Whiskey show is February 27th and 28th in London. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Throughout the years, Dewar's has created some incredible whiskeys. But our new Dewar's 12-year-old, that one's a personal favorite. It's the kind of scotch that earns praise from the pros, but still feels right at home in the middle of a good night with friends. Every pour opens up with notes of vanilla, toffee, baking spice, in a smooth oak finish. It's rich, it's approachable, and it has a way of bringing people together. Whether it's around the table, the fireplace, or just wherever the night happens to take you. Look, the glasses may hold the whiskey, but the whiskey, that's what holds the moment. Please enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025, Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey. David Vitale founded Starward Whisky back in 2007 to create uniquely Australian whiskies. By the time Diageo's Distill Ventures incubator unit invested in Starward in 2015, he had largely stepped back from running the business. Now, after buying out the Distill Ventures stake and his other investors, he's back in charge at Starward, setting a new course for the company. We talked this week on a Zoom call. So how hard was it for Starward these past few months while Distill Ventures was sort of out of the picture, but not really out of the picture?
Look, it wasn't easy. We had to make some changes internally to right-size the business for the sort of runway that we had to figure things out. And the board had made a decision that like the best thing to do, given the circumstances, was to look at a full sale of the business. And that gave me an opportunity to think about, whether I wanted to step into the river again and have another go.
So you bought the entire business?
That's correct, yeah.
Back in the saddle again, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It's exciting. Look, I think one of the things that is whiskey is a really capital intensive business, and so having had the support of Distill Ventures and Diageo to really get the rocket launched when you need as much fuel and and thrust to get it off the ground has been a huge opportunity for a brand like Starward.
So you're not regretting the Distill Ventures move?
Not at all. No, no. We wouldn't be the brand we are today in all the countries that we have around the world with the team that we have, the quality of the spirit that we have without that support. And so it's an interesting, sort of juncture in our road. It wasn't what I had planned for 2026 for sure, but I'm really excited that we're at that point in time and, really grateful for the support that we got from Diageo and Distill Venture over, the better part of 10 years.
You were one of the first distilleries to take part in Distill Ventures, weren't you?
That's right, yeah.
What was that like, having to answer to Diageo, but not quite answer to Diageo?
It's interesting. If I reflect on all of the, business is always full of compromise and evolution and change. That's the nature of good businesses. If I think about like what compromises we had to make as a business because of the Distill Ventures program, there were very few. I felt like very early on we aligned on what the job to do for Starward was. There are some, I guess you learn along the way, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. But as partners, I think we stepped into each of those sort of paths that we took together. And I think that for whatever those mistakes, if we want to call them that, were, that they're jointly held, not one versus the other in terms of like, oh, should we do this instead of that? Or like, let's go and, I think a really good example would be looking at the United States. Now, that had been a lifelong dream of mine to launch a brand in the United States. But with hindsight, we probably needed a few more years in Australia just to bed it down and make sure that like the Australian business was solid, that it was, had proven growth drivers that could kind of support a global business, a truly global business, because we're not Scotch, we're not bourbon, right? We're quite different. And so when you turn up to a retailer trading on just being an Australian whiskey, all of that local stuff that works for brands domestically, whether it's American whiskies or Australian whiskies, doesn't translate. And as you know, and I'm sure your customers know, like, or your audience knows that, like, we don't have a strong whiskey making heritage beyond 30 odd years. And so when you turn up to a retailer in Eastern Washington and say, oh, well, I'm making Australian whiskey, they can't join the dots in the same way you might be able to join the dots with a whiskey from another place. And so we had to do a bit more work on our own to do that. And that was, that had nothing to do with whether we were investing with Diageo or I had done that on my own.
Did any of your board stay on with you?
No, no, it was time. And also look, we've got some work to do internally to figure out, okay, if I use that metaphor of the rocket having launched and we've kind of passed through Earth's atmosphere, we can be leaner, we can kind of build on that momentum that we've developed. But having the infrastructure that we had, understanding that at some point we might be acquired by Diageo is not necessary anymore.
What's next for Starward?
Yeah, I think over the next 6 months, we're just going to have a long, hard look at the business and just understand, exactly what works. And as I was saying before, understand what those growth drivers are that can sustain us and give us the ability to really build on the momentum that we've had to date. And then, the ambition hasn't changed. I think that Starward should be on every self-respecting back bar around the world. I think the timeline under which that's going to happen is going to slow down, and we just got to make sure that we can do that in a way that is sustainable from a cash perspective, while still laying down world-beating whiskey and taking advantage of all of the great things that we've done in the past as we scale up.
Will the whiskey philosophy change at all of maturing in red wine casks?
No, I think that that's our biggest, that's our secret sauce. Red wine barrel aging makes Starward what it is. That's something that we did before we met Distill Ventures. It's something that we did during Distill Ventures, and it's certainly something that I plan to do into the future.
What about the U.S. market? Are you still over here, or are you slowly but surely trying to get into the market again, or what?
Yeah, I think, we took a big retreat in 2024, just because, well, the world had changed quite substantially. And um, I I understood that like it's going to take a lot longer than we originally thought. Um, and I'm still committed. I know American drinkers love Starward. We just need to give them a taste and off they go. But um, you know, Americans are spoilt for choice with American whiskey, and so I feel like there needs to be a bit of a reset, and particularly in the craft scene, let my kindred spirits in the US really till that soil for a bit of time, so that the craft American whiskey scene's really thriving, and those curious whiskey drinkers are sort of like then saying, well, what's next? And then Starward has an opportunity to kind of have some relevance in the market. Um, we really need to kind of be visible and made aware of, and beyond the whiskey shows. And it's really tough to do that in this economic climate.
How are you doing in Australia?
We're doing good. We're still growing, despite the challenges over the last, well, particularly 6 months while we were sort of working out what was next for Starward. We grew year on year in a category that was flat. So I'll take that as a win, given that we really, really were sort of spinning lots of different plates with a smaller team. And I think that all Australian craft whiskies have got relevance in the marketplace at the moment. I think Australians are starting to have a think about what's meaningful to them when it comes to an occasion for whiskey. And we all know that, I mean, I love a whiskey after dinner and something that like we can kind of drink neat, but whiskey as an ingredient in a great drink is something that Australians are getting quite excited about, and Starward's perfect for that.
Thanks to Starward's David Vitale for spending some time with us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey.
Our story begins in the wilds of County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland, a place where nature moves slowly and meaningfully. Some whiskies blend in. Glendalough Double Barrel stands apart. I'm Rowdy Rooney, head distiller here at Glendalough, and I personally oversee our whisky making process from start to finish. We do things slowly and we do them right. We start with a smooth single grain Irish whisky. We age it in flame-charred American oak for soft vanilla and a honeyed depth. Then we finish it in Oloroso casks from a small bodega in Spain. Casks we season and ship ourselves to make sure the wood is still alive with character when it arrives. That kind of care gives Glendalough Double Barrel its rich layers of dried fruit, warm spice and signature smoothness. This is a whisky at its own pace, and it's worth every second. This is Glendalough Double Barrel, crafted to stand apart.
I'm still fighting the chest cold I had last week, sipping medicinal drams and trying to get better, so the What I'm Tasting This Week department will return with new whiskeys next week. In the meantime, here are my tasting notes for whiskeys I tried at last month's Victoria Whisky Festival. Canada's Wildlife Distillery took home Rye Whisky of the Year honors in this year's Canadian Whisky Awards for its King of the North Rye. It's bottled at 46.8% ABV, and the nose has a honeyed sweetness with dried flowers and a hint of dill. The taste is spicy and chewy with white pepper and allspice notes, balanced by honey, dried flowers, and dill, while the finish is long and spicy. I'm scoring a Wildlife Distillery's King of the North Rye a 93. Tasted a couple of Tamnavulin whiskies during their master class in Victoria. The Tamnavulin Double Cask is the flagship of the range. It's a blend of sherry cask finished and American oak matured whiskies and is bottled at 40% ABV. The nose has touches of orange marmalade, red apples, toffee, and honey. The taste is fruity with pears, peaches, grilled pineapple, brown sugar, and vanilla notes, and the finish is also long and fruity. I'm scoring the Tamnavulin Double Cask Single Malt a 91. Finally, the Tamnavulin Port Cask is finished in tawny port wine casks and bottled at 40% ABV. The nose has notes of fresh berries, plums, dark chocolate, dried flowers, and a hint of orange peel. The taste has notes of berry compote, dried fruits, pears, honey, and a slight nuttiness, leading into a long and fruity finish. I'm scoring the Tamnavulin Port Cask a 92. Hoping to be back to normal next week, but in the meantime, I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of more than 3,900 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com. Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app and see what people are talking about this week. I've been posting shots of my medicinal drams in the app, and got a couple of comments after I went to the nuclear weapon, the Lafroig 10-year-old. Whiskey Dev responded from Malaysia, add a little hot water to it and inhale. Juan Cruz had a good question. What if that doesn't work? Octomore? Well, I tried some cask-strength Michter's bourbon instead. Didn't help much. And Law School Drunk had this comment. When I have a cold, my taste and smell are not optimal. Perfect time to take out the bottles I don't really like. I'm talking about you, Gibson's Finest 12-year-old Canadian whiskey that's been open for more than 11 years. I save Isla for optimal conditions. What's your go-to remedy for a cold? Download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. The Heart Cut was named Independent Bottler of the Year this week in Whiskey Magazine's regional round of its Icons of Whiskey Awards, and announced Sunday in an email to its customers that the new UK excise tax hike will mean a price increase for their whiskies starting this Tuesday. Not surprising, but Georgie Bell and Fabrizio Leone also provided a very transparent breakdown of what costs come out of each bottle of whiskey they sell. The biggest share, 30%, goes to the government in VAT and excise taxes, 26% goes into the whiskey itself, and 17% supports the people behind the whiskey. 19% goes to marketing and sales, 4% to logistics to get bottles delivered to customers, and 4% to business costs. That leaves a whopping 0% profit. Georgie and Fab are reinvesting any profits into buying casks and running the business. It's often been said that the best way to make a small fortune in the whiskey business is to start with a large fortune. Support your local independent bottlers and retailers out there, friends. And if there's something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links to the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and of course a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. We'd love to hear from you. Download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store, or find us on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
There's something special about opening a bottle of Dewar's 12 Year with the people who matter most. It brings out the stories, the laughter, and the kind of moments you don't plan, but never forget. Built on tradition, made for right now, and best when shared. Dewar's 12-Year-Old.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2026, and comes to you each week from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.